in the first 3 classes we built the mental map of the cloud. We learned what the cloud actually is, the service and deployment models that shape how you use it, and where all that hardware physically lives, in regions and availability zones. That was the theory. Today we stop looking at the map and we walk through the door. We open a real Amazon Web Services account, and we learn the 2 different ways you will control it for the rest of your career, and A212, the web console and the command line. And just as importantly, we learn the handful of safety habits that separate a professional from someone who wakes up to a stolen account or a shocking bill. None of this is difficult, but getting it right on day 1 saves you from the 2 most common, most painful beginner mistakes. So let us open the door properly. Here is what we will understand today. First, what an Amazon Web Services account really is and at E212, because it is more than just a login. Second, the root user, the single most powerful and most dangerous identity you own. Third, IAM users and why you create them instead of sharing one login. Fourth, the management console, the friendly visual way in. Fifth, the command line interface, the CLI, the way in that scales. And sixth, when to reach for the console and when to reach for the CLI, because a good engineer uses both. Let us begin. Let us start with the thing that everything else lives inside, an AT212, the account. When people hear Amazon Web Services account, they picture just a username and a password, but it is much bigger than that. An account is a container, a single boundary that wraps up 3 separate things into one. The first thing it holds is your resources and 812. And by resources, I mean everything you will ever create on Amazon Web Services. Every virtual server, every database, every stored file, every network you draw, they all live inside this one account, isolated from everybody else's. The second thing it holds is your users and A2112, the people who are allowed in, and exactly what each of them is permitted to do. An account is not just you, it is your whole team, each with their own carefully scoped access. And the third thing it holds is a single consolidated bill. Everything anyone in the account uses, across every service and every region, rolls up into one monthly invoice. That is enormously convenient, but notice the flip side, an 801. If one person leaves a giant machine running, it lands on the same bill as everything else. So the takeaway is this. An Amazon Web Services account is one container that holds all your resources, all your users, and a single bill. Getting the account set up safely is what the rest of this class is really about. When you first create an account, Amazon Web Services gives you one special identity to log in with. And it has a name, an A212, the root user. You need to understand exactly what it is because it is the most powerful thing you will ever touch on Amazon Web Services. The root user is born with the account. It is simply the email address you signed up with, and it exists the moment the account does an 8/212. You cannot delete it, and you cannot reduce its power. And that power is almost unlimited. The root user can do absolutely anything, launch or destroy any resource, of course, but also the things nobody else should ever do. A212, change the billing details, restructure the account, and even close the account entirely and delete everything in it. Think of it like the master key to a building that also opens the safe, the front door, and the demolition controls. Now sit with why that is dangerous. If an attacker ever gets your root password, they do not just steal some data, an 80/20 they own the entire account, and they can lock you out of your own business in minutes. There is no permission you can take away from root to make that safer because root has them all by definition. So the takeaway, the root user is all-powerful and 80/20. It can do everything, which is exactly why it is the most dangerous login you own. The whole next slide is about what to do with something that dangerous. So if root is this powerful, the professional's instinct is not to use it, and A212, it is to lock it in a drawer and walk away. Let me show you the contrast between the wrong habit and the right one. Here is the wrong way, the way that ends in disaster. You use the root user for your everyday work and A212, logging in every morning, clicking around, running your normal tasks. The problem is exposure. The more often you use a credential, the more places it can leak. An 812 house, a phishing email, a reused password, a laptop left open. And with root, a single leak is not a small problem. It is the whole account gone at once. Here is the right way. The very first thing you do is turn on multi-factor authentication for root NAT821, MFAN821, so that even someone with the password still needs the code from your phone. Then you sign out and use root only for the tiny handful of tasks that genuinely require it, like changing your billing information. The rest of the time, root simply sleeps. That habit and 80-80-12, MFA on, then almost never sign in as root again, and 80-80-80-12 is the single most important security decision a new Amazon Web Services user makes. It costs you 2 minutes and it removes your single biggest risk. So the takeaway, protect root with multi-factor authentication and then use it almost never, because a stolen root login loses everything in one stroke, and MFI plus disuse is what stops that. But if you are not using root for daily work, then who is doing the work? This is where IAM comes in, and A212, Identity and Access Management, and A202 half. And it is the answer to the question, how does everyone actually log in safely? The idea is simple. You give each person their own identity. Every human on your team and every application that needs access gets its own IAM user or role, and A2112, their own name, their own password, their own MFA. Nobody shares a login. When someone joins, you create one. When they leave, you remove just theirs, and everyone else is untouched. And here is the second half, which matters just as much, and A212, least privilege. You do not give each IAM user the keys to everything. You grant only the specific permissions their job actually needs, and nothing more. The person who manages databases gets database permissions. They do not get the ability to change billing. That way, if any one identity is ever compromised, the damage is contained to just what that one person could do. Contrast this with the tempting shortcut of just sharing the root password around the team. It feels easier on day one, but it means everyone has unlimited power. You cannot tell who did what, and you can never safely remove one person. IAM users fix all three problems at once. So, the takeaway? Create an IAM user for each person or application and grant each one least privilege and 8-200-200. Never share a single all-powerful login, because individual, limited identities are what make a team safe. Now that we know who logs in, let us talk about how you actually control Amazon Web Services and A212, and there are two ways. The first, the one you will start with, is the Management Console. The console is simply Amazon Web Services in a web browser. It is a visual dashboard that gives you point-and-click access to every single service Amazon Web Services offers. You log in, you see menus and buttons and forms, and you create things by clicking through screens. There is nothing to install. It is just a website. And the console is at its very best when you are learning. When you are meeting a service for the first time, the console shows you what it offers, and AT112, the options laid out, the settings explained, sensible defaults already filled in. It is wonderful for exploring, for one-off tasks, and for building an intuition for how a service is shaped before you ever automate it. The trade-off, which sets up the next idea, is that clicking is slow and it is not repeatable. If you have to build the same thing 50 times, or build it exactly the same way every time, doing it by hand in the console becomes tedious and error-prone. But for learning and for exploring, that trade-off does not matter, and A2112, and that is exactly where you are today. So the takeaway? The console is Amazon Web Services in a browser, and A212, visual, immediate, and perfect for exploring and learning one service at a time. It is the friendly front door, and it is where every beginner should start. Before we leave the console, there is one small control on the screen that causes more beginner confusion than almost anything else. And it connects straight back to what we learned last class. It is the region selector. Remember from the last class that Amazon Web Services is divided into regions all over the world. Here is the practical consequence. Almost everything you create belongs to one specific region, and A2112, the one that is selected, up in the top right corner of the console. At the moment you click Create, a server you launch in Mumbai simply does not appear when you are looking at the North Virginia region. And this is the classic beginner scare. You create a resource, then the next day you log in, you cannot find it anywhere, and you are convinced it has vanished or been deleted. 9 times out of 10, it is perfectly fine, and AD212, you are just looking in a different region than the one you built it in. Your resources did not move, your view did. So, the habit to build, starting now, is to glance at that region selector before you create anything, and to pick your region on purpose using the test we learned last class and AD112. Closeness to users, the law, cost, and available services. Consciously every time. So the takeaway, almost everything you build lies in one region, so always check the region selector first. And A2112, most my resource disappeared moments are simply looking in the wrong region. Now for the second way to control Amazon Web Services, the one that professionals live in once they are past the learning stage, and A212, the command line interface or CLI. The first step is to install it, and A212. The CLI is a small tool you add to your own computer, to your terminal. The second step is to configure it once. You give it your access keys, and A212. Think of them as a username and password made for programs rather than people in A212, and from then on, it knows who you are and which account to talk to. And then, the third step is simply to run commands. Every single thing you could do by clicking in the console, you can now do by typing one line in your terminal. Launch a server, list your files, create a database, and A212, one command each. The reason this matters so much is that typed commands are things you can save, share, and repeat. You can put 100 of them in a script and build an entire system in seconds, identically, every time. That is the leap the console cannot make. So the takeaway, the CLI controls Amazon Web Services from your terminal, and A212, you install it, configure your keys once, and then you can automate anything, exactly, and repeatably. It is how you go from clicking one thing to building 1,000. So you have two tools that do the same job in different ways. Which do you use? The honest answer, the professional answer, is both an AT-IT212, and the trick is knowing which one fits the moment. Reach for the console when you want to explore, and AT1 Dual, when you are clicking around to discover what a service can do, and AT1 Dual, and when you want to learn, because seeing something laid out visually is how understanding forms in the first place. Reach for the CLI when you want to automate, an AT1 Dual, when the steps belong in a script that runs itself, and A212 well, and when you need to repeat, so the thing is built identically every single time, with no human slip. Notice these are not rivals. They are two hands. Almost every experienced engineer learns a new service by clicking through it in the console, and then, once they understand it, moves that same work into the CLI so it can be automated. You start in one and grow into the other. So the takeaway, use the console to explore and learn, and use the CLI to automate and repeat, an AT2112. Most professionals live comfortably in both, choosing the right hand for the task in front of them. Before we end, let me turn everything we have said into a short, concrete checklist, and AT124. The exact 3 things you should do in the first 10 minutes of any new Amazon Web Services account. First, turn on multi-factor authentication for the root user, and then lock it away. This is your single biggest protection, and it takes 2 minutes. Second, create an IAM user for your own daily work, with only the permissions you actually need, and A212, least privilege, and A212, and use that for everything from now on, never root. Third, set a billing budget alarm. Tell Amazon Web Services to email you the moment your spending crosses a threshold you choose, so a forgotten machine or a runaway service can never become a shocking end-of-month surprise. Do these three things, and you have sidestepped the two disasters that catch almost every beginner and A202 Hove, the hijacked account and the horror bill and A202 Hove before you have built a single thing. So the takeaway, on day 1, protect root with MFA, work as a least privileged IAM user, and set a budget alarm. That is what a professional does first. Let us gather the whole class in one breath. An Amazon Web Services account is one container for all your resources, all your users, and a single bill. The root user can do anything, so you protect it with MFA and use it almost never. IAM users give each person their own least privileged access, and you never share root. The console is Amazon Web Services in a browser and A212, best for exploring and learning. The CLI does the same from your terminal and 8512, scriptable and repeatable. And everything is regional, so you always check the region selector first. Next class, NDA21, IAM in depth, users, groups, roles, and policies. One idea at a time. That is how you get started with Amazon Web Services and A212, not by rushing to launch a server, but by opening the account the way a professional does. One account holding everything, root locked safely away, your daily work done as a limited IAM user, the console for learning and the CLI for scale, and an eye always on your region and your bill. Set up like this, everything you build from here rests on solid, safe ground. We will see you in the next class.